Okay, welcome to tonight's call. So this is the NLP segment on relationships, and there's a few different segments. The overall class is turn conflict to communication and connection. So we all are in different relationships, whether it's a significant other, whether it's family relationships, whether it's coworkers, or even friends or acquaintances, other people that you know. We are all in relationships, and we might have some relationship habits and patterns that are interfering with the communication and connection that you would want to be experiencing. And so that's what we're looking at tonight, is understanding kind of the bigger picture of humans, what our minds are kind of looking for, sorting for. And we're going to also kind of dive into untangling some relationship patterns, as well as we'll be going through some NLP skills to set up new brain habits for communication and connection. So the first part of this is kind of getting the wider view of humans and how we operate. And I like to say, understanding humans, we are hardwired to be social. Our brain is wired in such a way that we are dependent on each other. And you can look through the history of humans, we don't have claws or a lot of things that predators have that they can exist on their own, like a mountain lion or a tiger. Humans are dependent on each other. And so in our social groups, as we are wired to be together, we are wired to be social, we have created interdependencies within our social group so that we can survive, right? So even our survival is dependent on this. And so this is one piece to really understand, that we are all really social, even though some of us might be more socially inclined than others. So we are meant to kind of thrive and connect in these groups. Even social psychology recognizes the influence of our social connections make a huge impact on our well-being, but also our immune system, and even our bodies have an impact with our social connections around us. So in understanding kind of this background of humans, we're wired to be social, and we've had thousands and thousands of years existing in tribes. And in our tribal cultures, we look at our brain is sorting for, and even, our automatic mind or even our instinct is sorting for, is this person a friend or is it a foe? And so our mind has kind of this general category. Even when we meet new people, we might consciously know they're not a foe, but certain differences, our mind might put them into that category because of our differences. So our mind is sorting for this. They're either included within our tribe, and we're recognizing similarities with the people that we're meeting, or they're different from us. And different can mean foe. So even in work situations, when meeting new people, connecting with clients, we're all sorting for this, and it's not really a perceptible level, but our unconscious mind is doing this kind of in the background. Is this person like me, the sameness category is part of that tribe, or is this person different, which then is part of the foe category? So you see ways that humans connect with each other, kind of in those general categories. If someone has the same religion, our mind says, oh, this is the same category, we are part of the same tribe. Or if there's a difference in religion, depending on your background or your history, you might feel a difference with that person. We see a lot of the sameness and difference, especially in the political realm, where people are becoming even quite tribal in their connection. You're either this or you're that. If you're the other, you're not like me. And so this is one of the categories that your mind is kind of automatically sorting for. So this is just a representation of those layers of the mind and our conscious awareness versus our unconscious. Of course, I like to call the unconscious mind the automatic mind, It's in charge of whatever is running automatically. So as you're meeting new people or connecting with people, they might be saying one thing at the conscious level, and that's how your brain is processing what they say. But there are also other factors within your communication that are being sorted through the unconscious or automatic mind. So we're going to begin deep diving into what is going on at the deeper level and how to kind of tease apart some of those habits and patterns, and that we can find those leverage points in what to shift or adjust so we can be experiencing more of the communication and connection that we want to be experiencing. So here's back to this layers of the mind depiction, the image of the iceberg. The top part above the water is a much smaller portion. It's like 10%. We're active, planning, adulting at the conscious level. We understand logic. So then the unconscious mind is kind of like that highly compact supercomputer. So think of the unconscious mind is that it has a huge archive of information that it draws from. And so there's a lot of information for it to sort through. So, but it's the bigger part of our mind, so to speak, in this model. It would be the 90% under the surface, that we're not necessarily aware of it, but it's still operating and processing at the unconscious level. So as you're listening to this presentation, you might be aware of the words and those you're following at the conscious level, but there's also other information going on at the unconscious automatic level that you may not be consciously aware of. It might be like how your clothes feel against your skin. That's being collected in your unconscious level of awareness. Even things like room temperature, barometric pressure, these things are also being collected. So you can recognize that the unconscious mind is taking in a lot more information than what we're processing at the conscious level. And this can also be a reason for why there is a disconnect as we're connecting with people. Now, another thing to keep in mind, especially when we're working with the unconscious mind, is to think of the unconscious mind as a highly compact supercomputer. It's able to process large amounts of information very quickly. One of those is sorting, is this person like me or not like me? And it's looking for if are they same or are they different? So it's sorting for the samenesses and the differences. And even though we don't have like the tribal culture that we might have had in the past, the mind is still kind of operating from those categories. And so this is another one of the factors that play into how our mind is kind of perceiving our communication and our connections with each other. So this is some, when we get into understanding the unconscious mind, we also recognize that there's more than words that is going on in our communication. So words can be like the literal meanings. It can be metaphoric meanings. Imagery can be part of the words that we use. And it's not just the meaning of words, but it's the association of the word. And it's also kind of the, they call it connotation. So there's the literal meaning of the word ran, but the connotation might have a different feeling attached to that word. And then as we get into understanding communication, we recognize that communication is not just about the words that we say or the words that we use. And of course, with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, we recognize that the words we use can make a big difference in what the mind focuses on and how it perceives that communication. But there's also the deeper level of communication can include body language. Body language can be your posture, how you're holding yourself. Here's kind of one that we can recognize on the Zoom call, is when people have their chin up, and you'll see this in photos. What is your instant thought about how they perceive themselves or perceive the world? So you can even look at Like, oh, I got my nose in the air. You've probably heard that phrase before. Or she's so stuck up, right? So if the chin is lifted, people have like the feeling or the sense of that posture comes across as they're looking down on you. Or if you know, the pictures that you see with people taking the photo above, and so they're looking up into the camera, that has a connotation of being submissive, that you're looking down on the person. So this is one thing to recognize, even going through your photos that you're using. It's not just the picture, that it's the message that we're conveying through our posture, through our facial cues, through our smile, our expression, and even our micro expressions. And our micro expressions, this can be part of the body language information that comes through at even an unconscious level. There's a great researcher, we'll kind of touch on his work a little later, but he recognized, he was looking at people's communication patterns and he was videotaping them, and then he slowed the videotape down to notice what they were saying through different times that they were communicating. So he would notice, okay, if they're saying a lie, what are their facial expressions doing kind of frame by frame? And he started to recognize patterns, that even though the person is saying the words and they sound believable, when they're telling a lie, there are little subtle cues that their face is doing that are giving those telltale signs of the lie. So that's one specific application of that. But those micro expressions is not just about a lie, it can also be about our emotions. So recognize that we're in communication with people, all of this information is coming through at even an unconscious level. And we might not be consciously aware of the person's micro expressions, but your unconscious mind is picking it up. It's picking up those messages. So you might even recognize, like maybe a conversation with someone that you had where they were saying the right words, but something felt off. Maybe it was a mismatch in their body language, or maybe it was just a sense of something. That information can be conveyed through those micro expressions, through a misalignment of their posture to what they're saying versus what they're meaning and how they're coming across. So pay attention to that, that words are only a small piece of our communication. Now, when we communicate, there's also other influences that convey meaning as well. So we use our voice, our vocal tone, emphasis. I think this was from a movie. The person in the movie said, oh, he has the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? So it's the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, but just because the emphasis is off, even though the words are the same, it sounds wrong, right? So even in our vocal tone and inflection, we're communicating as well. And especially in the English language, we use vocal tone to communicate questions. Are you ready to go to the store? You can hear like our questions go up at the end. Here's kind of another practical use of that. Some of us have a tendency to use a question even when we're speaking with people and our communication can sound like a question, but the inferred experience of that using a lot of questions can sound like we're not confident. So what did you think about going to the store? What did you think about that movie? Trying to pick like a question that's not a question. So you went to the store then? You know, it's like that phrase, so you went to the store then, it doesn't have to be a question, but it can sound like one. You'll start noticing this with speakers or people, and in fact, for speakers, there's often, you want to recognize what communication habits that you have when you're speaking and presenting, and recognize how can you change those so that the vocal tone is actually matching the feeling that you want to convey. rather than some of this habit that we tend to have that comes through automatically. So also with our communication, our conscious mind, we're using the words, we're saying the words at a conscious level, we're using logic, maybe reasoning, but our unconscious mind is kind of funneling or filtering all of this communication through our automatic mind as well. So especially kind of with this slide that you see here, you have two people and then the space between them, there's arrows on both sides, that our communication is being filtered through the unconscious mind. And some of our perception about communication can come through words, body language, vocal tone, but also the unconscious mind and the meanings that are attached. So we're going to deeper dive into that piece of it as well with the unconscious mind. And here's a great statistic about this. So this is Dr. Albert Mehrabian, and he is the author of Silent Messages. I actually Googled him. He's in the UCLA in psychological studies. And he conducted several studies. He wanted to know what amount of our communication is verbal versus nonverbal. And kind of through his studies, he determined that 93% of communication is nonverbal. So what this means, there's kind of a breakdown here of the study. He concluded that the meaning of communication is conveyed in these ways. Only about 7% is in our words. Now, our vocal elements, like we're talking about tone, emphasis, and we're talking about tempo even. If we're talking really fast, that conveys something about our energy or about our pace. If we're talking really slow, it also conveys something about our energy, right? So there's multiple vocal elements within that window, but the vocal elements can be part of the equation, about 38%. And then nonverbal elements, he attributed to things like those facial expressions, gesture, posture, body language, is 55%. So you can see the greater part of our communication actually comes through those nonverbal elements. Our unconscious mind is picking up those cues and sorting through that, and we're getting kind of a sense or a feeling about what the person is saying. And then those vocal elements are also illustrating the meanings, and then our conscious mind is listening to the words at a conscious level. So there's some difference of opinion around his studies and research, but it is quite fascinating because often when we're listening to people talk, and we've kind of been trained in our culture to listen to only the words and pay attention to only the words. But when we take into account that there's so much more communication that is going on, that there are all of these vocal elements, that there's all of these nonverbal, the body language, those expressions, even those micro expressions that we can't recognize at a conscious level, our unconscious mind is still sorting through those communications. And so this helps us to understand that our communication is more than words. Now here's an NLP principle. And NLP has several presuppositions. The presupposition in that they're supposing these principles to be true. And so a lot of the how NLP is constructed is based on these principles. So one is NLP principle. It's actually termed in a double negative. You can't not communicate. So to put that into the positive phrasing, we are always communicating. We are always communicating. If we are silent, we're still communicating, right? Silence is a communication. If we are distracted, we are communicating. If we are delayed in our response, we are communicating. And some of our communication we may not be intending. But keeping in mind that people are always communicating. We're communicating through body language. We're communicating through facial expressions, through our gestures. So we're always in this process of communicating. Now, there's some subtle ways that this communication comes through. So as we start looking at body language and how that relates to our communication, part of this can be seen like meeting someone new. And you can see the picture of the two gentlemen here, and they're standing in a similar way. They're kind of offset like a 90-degree angle with each other. They both have their hands in their pockets. You can see their facial expressions. They're kind of up. They're not down or depressed, right? And they're up and they're talking and communicating. Part of their body posture looks similar. And we recognize that when we meet people that are in that kind of sameness category or having conversations, they're in that sameness category, our body language will naturally tend to match each other. We call it mirroring and matching. And so this is one way that we are communicating kind of that same tribe. We're on the same team. We believe the same thing. So one way to kind of connect with this when you're meeting with new people or set them at ease with that sameness is to look for those commonalities, the places where we have common experience is things that we can relate to, and it's easier to get on the same page. Now, we all have samenesses with each other. We all have differences with each other. But as we focus on the sameness, people tend to be included in that sense of tribe or connection. So I share this with some of my clients that have even like fears or anxiety in meeting new people. And they're like, I just don't know what to talk about. Or they didn't want to feel awkward, or somewhere in their history, they were made to feel like that they said the wrong thing. And so now they don't kind of trust themselves to say the right thing. So simplest level, looking for those commonalities. What are things that are the same that you can ask about? Well, kind of the elevator talk, something very common is the weather. Because if we're in the same location, the weather is probably similar. Of course, with Zoom, we're connecting with people all across the world, and we might have very different weather. But it's something that we can both relate to. And so in developing kind of that sameness or setting people at ease, letting them know that you're part of their tribe, you're looking for pointing out some of those things that you have in common. Other ways that people might connect are, do you have kids? And then if you have kids, you start talking about your kids and showing pictures of your kids, and we feel a sameness. Oh, this person is like me. Married, not married. Those can be places we connect. What about pets? I found my pet is, if you're a dog lover, then connecting with other dog lovers becomes really super easy. Oh, do you have an animal? Or noticing like the fur that's on their coat or their jacket. Oh, I see you have a pet. Do you have a dog or cat? So those are easy ways to observe and find those commonalities. And of course, once you start talking about people's pets, what do? Oh, they light up. They get, they're accessing or connecting with what they feel for their pet, and it starts to come through in their emotion. And then when we're talking with people, we also kind of reflect that emotion to each other, or we mirror or match that emotion for ourselves. Occupation, what do you do for a living? These are all places that you can connect. So if you found it awkward in like social situations, just start looking for what are the commonalities? What are those things that you can talk about, that you can recognize or identify some of those places you guys have similar experience or related experiences. Now, people will naturally mirror and match. This is kind of an NLP, well, NLP kind of took some terms and focuses on those terms, and it becomes part of the NLP speak. So if you start talking about rapport in the mainstream public, 50% might get it, 50 might not. But in the NLP field, rapport is a big piece of this puzzle, how we relate with other people, right? So rapport means, are we relating in a sameness way with other people Do we have kind of a shared connection, or is there a lack of rapport, that the person is not connecting with us, not listening to us? We also recognize this, especially with clients. When clients come in, we recognize, are they connecting with me? Do they feel like they can trust me and open up with me? Or are they feeling kind of distant or blocked? I see this particularly with parents who bring their kids in. When they bring their kid in, depending on the age of the kid, sometimes I have the parents and the kid together, and then I have just kind of a short window to get rapport from the kid, because this is mom's idea, right? And so I have to get on the same page with the kids so that they feel that they can trust me. And when we trust people, we are more open to being influenced with people. Especially with NLP or hypnosis, we want people to follow us from maybe a negative behavior or negative perspective to a more positive and supportive one. So in that process of following, they have to be open to that connection or recognize that connection. So this is one way that we can recognize connection, is that, or recognize that rapport. So mirroring and matching. So that refers to the body language that comes across when we are naturally connecting with people. We will naturally mirror and match them with the people that we agree with or that we have rapport with. And we're falling into that same sameness category. Oh, this person is like me, therefore they're a friend. So you can see the picture of the two gentlemen. They're standing in a similar way. They both have their hands in their pockets. And even you can recognize this, and this is kind of one of the action steps to take, is go people watching. Give yourself 20, 30 minutes, go to a public place, maybe a coffee shop. Coffee shops are kind of fun. We're kind of in winter here now. So, going to a park may not be as comfortable, but going to a coffee shop, you see all sorts of different meetings. You see friends coming together, and you can recognize their rapport, how they're mirroring and matching people when they're having a conversation. But you can also see people dating that come together. Are they connecting, or is their body language off? At what point, if you're watching a couple, just in their body language, at what point are they starting to offset or disconnect, that they're not mirroring and matching each other? You can also see business people coming to meet and talk about business or talk about different deals or connections. And what are they doing? Are they matching and coming together? Are they creating rapport together? Or are they at odds? Are they mismatching with each other? So this shows a similarity in how we stand, our posture, that we will naturally mirror and match people that we have rapport with. And even some of the, there is an element of NLP to use NLP for persuasion or to get people to do what you want them to do. That's not really where I go with this. However, it's more like paying attention to the body language, both yours and the people that you're talking with, and how can you kind of utilize that to increase that connection with people. And of course, we want to use this with clients because we don't have a big window to really establish that connection, but we do want them to follow us from maybe a negative perspective to a more positive one. So only use this in ways that are ethical, safe, and moral, right? And so this conversation with the two gentlemen on the right, start noticing this with people in your day-to-day. And this is part of one of the action steps to take. Take 20 minutes, go to a coffee shop, and just notice who's in rapport and who is not, who is at odds with each other. It's kind of funny to watch people because you can even kind of get a sense of their story in how they're communicating and what they're talking about. If somebody's going into a really deep story and they're really excited about it, but the other person, their attention starts to wander off, see if you can notice some of those subtle kinds of differences in communication. So here's just another picture about body language. So these two kids in the room, each of them have a toy, but what is their body language expressing? And are these two coming together, or are they at odds? And, they're at odds with each other. So start looking for that. Another kind of quick note on mirroring and matching, you can create kind of this sense of sameness or connection just by adjusting your body language. Now, when we're naturally meeting people and connecting with people, we will match their mirror or match. So, for instance, it's like standing in front of a mirror. If I have my arm up on one shoulder and kind of like that, then the mirror, it would be the other arm, right? So, but as we see ourselves in the mirror reflection, it's on the same side. Our reflection is the same side, but if we would turn the reflection, it's opposite. So, but what it is it's looking for the similarities in our body language, in our posture, how we're showing up with the people when we're having positive communication and connection versus being at odds or not having that rapport. We will naturally mirror and match people, so just being similar in our posture. I remember one presenter that he was presenting, and he just wrote something down he was demonstrating the mirroring and matching, wrote something down on a paper, put it to the side, called somebody up, a volunteer, and just started talking with this guy. And as he was talking, he just started to, naturally kind of move. And by the end of the conversation, they were both swaying backward and forward. They didn't know why, they were just swaying. He picked up the paper, and what it said is, we're swaying backward and forward. So it's kind of the presenter, as he was illustrating this, he was adjusting his communication, his body language, in a way that the person was naturally following his pattern, his body language. And so as he was starting to sway, the other person was also starting to sway. And now this happens naturally when we naturally have a connection or a rapport with someone. So this is also kind of a fun action to utilize. I don't like to think about it too much because it starts to make you feel a little awkward in conversations if you're focusing on this. But recognize when you're having, like even at a holiday dinner, we have a holiday coming up, think about, oh, okay, if I'm having a conversation, if you cross your leg one side, you might notice the person that you're talking with, that they start to cross their leg too, or to shift your weight to one side or the other side and notice if the other person follows you. And again, we do this automatically because it's kind of the way that we connect, or it's the representation in our body language that we are connecting. And yes, you can fabricate this, but again, use this in ways that are safe, ethical, and moral. But it does give you a little bit of more background about how our communication is showing up in our body language as well. So again, just to recognize that at the conscious level, we're understanding the words and the meaning of words, but our unconscious mind is kind of sorting through all of this stuff, because we've been talking about vocal tone and body language. It's sorting it automatically. And so, as I mentioned before, if you think about a conversation where someone was saying the right words, but something felt off, there's probably some telltale signs showing up in either their communication, their micro expressions, or maybe even the person's energy or intention is a little off from what feels aligned to you. Now, there's other factors as well. We're going to dive into the unconscious filters of the mind, and this starts to illustrate this even more. So here's the resources for kind of this first part. Is the quote that I shared is from Dr. Mehrabian at the UCLA Psychology Studies, and that website is socialpsychology.org. So again, that's Mehrabian.socialpsychology.org. And you can see that link there. If you want to find out more about his research and studies, you can follow that. He also has that book, Silent Messages, talking about body language as well. And also the researcher that I mentioned is Paul Ekman, and the Ekman group did the psychology studies for recognizing those micro expressions. So for instance, they actually developed a great television series called Lie to Me, which is about kind of his research. That the main character is the researcher, and what they do is bring in people associated with a crime or bring in different witnesses, and his job is to recognize, are they lying or are they telling the truth? And so his job is to determine their intentions by their body language, and especially these micro expressions. But what is so fun about that television show is that it will show the person's expression, micro expression, and then it'll show all of the places, like political figures or people through history or giving different presentations, how they also had that micro expression. And so it makes the content really relatable, but it also feels like you're kind of learning about those different expressions. So those are the two resources for more on that body language or the nonverbal communication. And now here's some action. One is to, and you can do this with friends or family, especially over the holiday, is to just share a story. Or as you're finding yourself connecting with friends or family, just notice, how is your body language showing up? How does yours show up versus how does theirs show up? Notice how people are mirroring and matching each other. If you're in a conversation and feeling really connected with someone, notice how their body language is matching that. Another action step is to go to a park or a coffee shop and people watch for 20 to 30 minutes and kind of notice, what is their body language saying or expressing from one conversation to another one to another one, then noticing, are they on the same page or are they at odds? Are they not connecting? Who is matching and who appears to be at odds with each other? So this is pretty fun to watch. And again, we do this automatically, but as you're aware of it, you can also be more kind of intentional with the practice of mirroring and matching as well.